Please welcome the founder of StarWorks USA, Paola Harris.
Thank you. I need your thing. Good morning. Good morning. You probably wonder where that name came from, right? So let me tell you that when I was in Italy, I used to do conferences, and I used to call them StarWorks Italia because I lived in Italy for 15 years. And where I got it from was Spielberg. He has DreamWorks, with the little boy with the fish hook sitting on the half moon. So I said, God, I got to do something like that, but I can't copyright Spielberg. So what I'm going to do is have a little boy looking, and that's my logo, looking at fireworks. And then I said, I can't do DreamWorks, so what sounds like DreamWorks? So I'm going to do StarWorks. So that's where that name came from. It is an LLC that I created in Italy to do conferences there and bring over top-level people from America. Because and I'm going to say this over and over again, that the UFO phenomenon is not American, it's universal. It's completely worldwide. So when I moved back to America, what I did was I changed from Italia to USA. So, but that's not what I do for a living. I'm only doing this because it's a way to change the paradigm, the thinking. And after 30 years in the field, I've changed my mind about so much. I was a nuts and bolts person. And when I worked with Hynek, I was putting pins in maps, and I was getting all these sightings. And after a certain time, after 20 years, how many more sightings do you need? I know it's real, like where do we go from here? So then I began exopolitics, and I teach online with Dr. Michael Sala. I teach courses. However, what really turns me on and the most exciting thing in my life is the field research. So this is a venue here in Laughlin where I can share, for the first time, field research. What am I going to share with you right now? Well, I've been working on this case for 9 years. And I have been working on it and have lost one of the witnesses already. So let me begin from the beginning. When I was in Italy, I read a story about two little Mexican boys that had seen a UFO crash in 1945. And while I was there, I had read this story. It was Ben Moffat in the Socorro newspaper, and my first thoughts were, why aren't my colleagues covering this? But I didn't know, because the universe had it in its mind to have me cover this. Because it's very, very difficult for people to believe there's any other crash but Roswell. But there was. In 1945, 1 month after the atomic bomb, on the Jose Padilla Ranch in Socorro, New Mexico, two little boys, Jose Padilla, age 9, and Remy Vaca, age 6. And you think they're awfully little. No, they're not. Jose told me that in 1945, he not only drove a truck at 9, he would help his father mend fences and look for cows. And his little buddy, Remy, who was 6, would go with him on the horse. These were other times. 1945 were other times. So what did I do? I talked to Remy Baca, the little 6-year-old who was in his 70s, and unfortunately he had diabetes at the time. And I talked to him on the phone for 2 years, and he would not let me see the crash site because he wanted a full-length documentary made or something. And then what had happened was that I kept asking him what happened, and he said, well, Paula, he said, we were 13 miles from the Trinity site. When we were riding our horses on Jose Padilla's property, there was a thunderstorm, and remember this, because thunderstorms also happen in the Roswell incident, a terrible thunderstorm. He said, Jose and I, we went under a ledge with our horses, and we heard a boom. He said the boom was almost as powerful as the atomic bomb, because they lived in Socorro, 13 miles from Trinity, and they saw the atomic bomb blast. They saw it, they lived it, and the irony is they were not told anything about it. So that at 4 o'clock in the morning, when Jose's mother thought that it was daylight or a car coming up the driveway, there was a huge explosion. She opens the door and she's blinded in one eye. That city was not told about the atomic bomb blast ahead of time. Afterwards, when everybody was angry about it, they said, what happened on that day? I think it was July 16th, 1945. A day the world stood still. When that happened, the town had a meeting, and Jose and Remy told me they were all called together, and they said it was an explosion of an ammunition dump. They were never told about the bomb. The thing is that when we have those kinds of incidents, and it's normal, somebody up there, somebody in the cosmos notices, because I think what happens is that it vibrates in many, many different dimensions. And there was not one. Remember, this is 45, and Roswell's 47, 1947. 1945, somebody noticed. And the two little boys, after the thunderstorm, waiting on the ledge, heard a boom. And they saw a craft come in. They saw it, and you're going to see this because we just did a 20-minute documentary. You're going to see the actual location. The craft came in. It kind of made a gouge in the earth. And the two little boys, being curious little boys that they were, took their binoculars, went really close to the craft, and a piece of it was broken off, and they saw three little beings. And they're going to use the word sashaying back and forth, but they were sliding back and forth. And Jose will tell you that he heard a loud, screechy cry like they were hurt. And Jose wanted to go in, he's a 9-year-old, to help them. He said they were hurt. I wanted to help them, but then Remy started crying. There was burnt mesquite all the way around this area. Now, I covered this story, and I saw he just walked in, and so did Jaime Maussan for Univision. He covered it professionally, and I covered this story. I've been to the crash site at least 5 times. It was just this year that I asked Jan Harzan, David Garcia, Tom Hamlin to come with us to do some field research because something very, very strange happened. This crash site has the circular mark of the UFO, and for 70 years, because 1945 to now, 70 years, nothing has grown in that. It was circular and dry. This year, for the first time, there's been plants planted that are poisonous. Only in that circle. Nowhere else on that property. And in order to do good field research, we gave a sample of the plants to Jason Reynolds, and we have his mother-in-law here because Julia Steiner helped us with that. I had to look for a botanist. You need a botanist for plants. And that plant is called cocklespur. It is poisonous, but in the 180,000 acres, it's only in that circle. So the message was, do not dig here. Because when they will tell you when you see this documentary, it was the first crash. It was 1 month after the atomic bomb. The 7 young men that were on duty, it took 8 days to clean it up and put it on an A-frame and pull it out there, were the same 7 young men that used to go into the Owl Bar and Cafe that were part of the Manhattan Project. The Owl Bar and Cafe, you will see a small still of it, was where Oppenheimer and the scientists were housed. It was the only watering hole in town. It had, you'll hear Jose say, that's where the girls were. So that's why the young men that were cleaning up, instead of picking up every piece, took their foot and they would push the pieces in a berm. Somebody knows there's pieces out there. They did not pick them all up. And the boys are watching every day. So the boys want to get a souvenir because they're watching this, and they say, oh, we're going to. And Jose will say, I wanted a souvenir. And in Spanish, they called it el tesoro, which means the treasure. So on the very last day, what happened was that the men, the boys, because they were playing country music and cleaning up a crash. Can you imagine this? Country music, there was one, he said, sentinel watching. And the other guys were taking the pieces and with their foot putting them in a berm, the bigger ones they'd pick up. No hazmat suits, nothing. They put the craft on an A-frame and on a flatbed truck, had to cut the cattle guard. Everybody was told to be quiet. Jose's father was told it was a weather balloon. They had to cut the cattle guard for a weather balloon. And Jose will say, we used to collect their weather balloons all the time and give them back to the military. This was no weather balloon. So this case is brand new. I've talked about it at MUFON. But this case is important because Roswell was not the first crash. And what's so sad is even though I worked on this case, Remy Baca died about 2 years ago. And that's so sad because unless we get to these people, we don't have the witnesses. And my final word before I show you this documentary and bring up the expedition team that was on here so you can hear their impressions. They were there for 3 days. For me, the smoking gun is witness testimony. Even though there's metal involved, the smoking gun is the witnesses. Okay, can we let this film go?
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In the dead silence of the morning, at 5:29:45 Mountain War time, the Jornada del Muerto was bathed in an intense flash of a light that man had only seen from the stars.
This case, 1945, were two little boys, Jose Padilla and Remy Baca. And Jose was 9 and Remy was 6, and we no longer have Remy with us. So it's very important that we capture for the future, for future generations, and for the history of this phenomenon, what happened here. And it's very great that we can actually come on location and do this. My part in it is that I started in 2009 talking to Remy Baca about this case, and it took about 3 years to actually come on location to the crash site. When I came on location for the first time, I was with James Fox and Ethan, and we were here and we had to film it. Do you remember, Jose, because we wanted to get your testimony?
Yes.
And you remember James took you up on that hill and had you recite exactly what it was like to watch the craft.
Yes, it was.
We were looking for a cow that was going to calve.
Could you take
And
your glasses off, or do you need them?
no,
Do you need them?
no. I can see too good, but and we were dodging the rain, a heavy storm, when a thunder, real thunder, came up, and I told Remy, it must be another test from another bomb. And he says, no, he says, it doesn't look like that. So we got from underneath the ledge of the rocks, and he says, look at the smoke coming up from the ledge out there. So we got on the horses and trot down here, down the arroyo. We stopped over here, tied the horses over to a mesquite.
And so we made our way up there, and as we went over the ridge, we saw a lot of smoke and brushes on fire, and it's the kind of smoke that kind of like chokes you. You can't breathe very well. We retreated, continued to work our way through, and as we did, we saw this gouge in the earth, a gouge that was maybe like 100 foot wide. We didn't know of any large graters at that time that were that big, but that's what we thought maybe might have made that crevice, basically. And so we followed that crevice through, and towards the end of it, there was an object that shaped like an avocado.
How close did you get to the object?
It would say about 300-400 feet from there down to here.
Okay, that's at that time.
That first day, yeah.
The very first day.
Yeah.
And then what did you observe? Can you describe what it looked like to you as you were looking at it?
It was something that I had never seen before, you know.
Right.
It wasn't an airplane.
But it was this oval-shaped object. Now, was it symmetrical in terms of all the sides were the same, or was it like egg-shaped, like maybe one side was bigger than the other, or was it?
No, it was like a true oval,
Okay.
smooth,
Okay.
and on the back it had a dome
Oh, okay.
on the back end, which was pointed out to the north.
And what color was it?
It was a kind of a rustic green,
Yeah.
grayish.
Okay. Rustic green.
Rustic
gray.
green, like they had thrown a lot of dust on it.
Okay. And was there, as I recall reading this, there was some kind of a groove because when it actually hit the ground, it skidded for some ways.
When that object came down from that Italian pickup here, when it hit, it must have grounded, and it started hitting the ground and skiing from that old road that you cannot see too good from here. It skid all the way down to over here, turning around in circles until it landed right in here. And that groove was about a foot deep.
Okay.
From there, it's about 2 football field.
And then somehow there was a hole torn in the side of this craft, correct?
On one side, there was a gap in there about 6 by 13 feet.
Okay.
And the closer we got to that object, the weirder it became. We could see this creatures darting back and forth in the craft, creatures that we were not aware of. If you were to ask me at that time, and if you were to ask me today what they looked like a campamocha.
No ears, unless they had a coating of something on it. And I noticed that their shoulders were kind of narrow, but had long arms. And what surprised me that they had 4 fingers, probably longer than what a monkey would have.
Were they naked?
They didn't show no sign of genitals or anything. You know, it's just like it seemed like it was like a tight uniform, or if that was their skin. The nose, you know, you can see no holes for the nose, you know, where they could breathe. The mouth was an open, real round, kind of round.
And could you see into the craft?
Yes, we could, because we were standing over there on that side.
And what did you see exactly?
We seen 3 little men just running back and sashaying back and forth, screaming, funny scream. And that's when I told my friend, you know, they're hurt. Let's go over and help them. And he wouldn't come down, you know. So I says, well, I'm going to go anyway. He started crying. He says, I'm going to go to the ranch, and you go ahead and do whatever you want to do.
Right.
That's when I decided to mount the horses and
How did you
took off.
describe the sound that they made? Because you made it sound like
Like a, well, I shot a lot of rabbits. And when a rabbit is hurt, he's got this high pitch. Like when a newborn baby is born,
Mm-hmm.
the first pitches that that's the way it was.
So was it kind of a screech or a scream?
A
or
scream,
a scream?
but a real funny scream, wild scream,
There was there was a certain amount of fear to it that I felt like I was in the movies, and I hadn't seen very many movies at that time, but I felt like I was right in it, and I had these feelings that were being projected from them to me through my mind. I could feel what they were feeling: pain, anxiety. They were far away from home. They were lost. They were hurt, and I could feel that. And I could see all kinds of pictures in my mind that to this day I have not been able to figure out what they were.
I was pretty sure that they were injured. That's why they were running back and forth squealing.
We stayed there as long as we possibly could. Jose was intent on going in and trying to see if he could help. But, given the circumstances that we didn't know what the object was, we had no idea what those creatures were. As such, we eventually made our way back to the ranch and reported everything to Jose's dad, Faustino. After that, he said to leave the horse there. They'd take care of it, and they would drive me home, and he'd explain to my mom why I was late. So we did that and went home, and he explained to my mom. And the following day, Jose came up and got me. We went and got my horse saddled up and so forth. And we made one trip over to the fences, checked all the fences that we hadn't checked before. And we found one post that was rotted out, so we replaced that, wired it up, and then continued on to the crash site. And it was probably like late afternoon when we got there, and we were up on a ridge looking down, and there was some activity. There appeared to be some soldiers down there doing whatever they were doing, and so we knew we weren't supposed to be there, but we were up on the ridge, and we were fairly well covered by some of the bushes and so forth, that we didn't feel anybody would detect us anyway. And so we stayed there until the soldiers left, and everybody was gone, so we went down and looked at the part of the crash site that we hadn't seen before as such, and picked up whatever debris was on the ground there, little larger pieces, and threw them in this, we call it a crevice. It's where an arroyo begins, and it gets wider and bigger as the water goes through it. And so we threw it. It was probably about 6-8 foot deep and 2 or 3 foot wide, and threw pieces in there and tried to cover them up with debris, branches and sand and gravel and so forth, rocks. And we did that, and then left.
A day or so later, the military came and they met with your father, right? And what did they ask him?
They told him we had gone to the store, and we came in the back door with the groceries, and there was this man standing on the front door on the outside, the screen door, talking to my dad.
And so the soldier's name was, introduced himself as Sergeant Avila, and he was with the United States Army. And he was there to talk to Faustino regarding an experimental weather balloon that had accidentally crashed on their property. And so they wanted to cut a 30-foot piece of the fence and replace it with a gate and said they would put a good gate on there and that they could use after they left. And so they needed just cooperation on it.
You had to cut the fence. Isn't there a cattle guard? And then the soldier told him the cattle guard is not wide enough to get a caterpillar in there to build a road, which they built this road over here too.
So they had a caterpillar that they wanted to bring in here. Okay. But was the caterpillar like a plow, or was that a flatbed truck?
DC-7, which is the biggest caterpillar with the wider blade.
Okay. And that couldn't go through this current
No, it
opening
won't
over
go
here.
through
It
here.
had to go through something else. So what did they do?
They went ahead and cut this fence over here. This was a wrought iron gate that the military set. But the people afterwards, they cut it in pieces and sold it as scrap metal. See, that's vandalism, you know. and afterwards, they set up this fence over here too.
The day before, when we had talked to his dad and made our report, his dad mentioned that he would be looking into it in a few days, and so that looking into it turned into us going leading his dad and Eddie Apodaca, the state patrolman, to the crash site, because they wanted to see it and see what was going on. And so when we rode in the pickup and they rode in the state patrol car, and so when we got there, we followed pretty much the same trail that we did before. And when we got up on the ridge and looked down, and you couldn't see this object, you know, so they begin, I think, to doubt us, you know. They didn't say it, but you could kind of sense it that they were doubting us, you know. And Jose's dad says, well, in any event, let's go down, you know. So we started walking down, and as he got down further, then you could see it. I don't know whether it was the way the sun was, the light was, or whatever, but it was there. And so then we went, got close to it. We were probably about 25 foot. We'd stay there, and they went in and they went through it as such, and then came back, and their attitude had changed. They were pretty good to us then. You know, at first they were kind of grumpy, you know, but so they knew that what we had told them was we were telling the truth. And so they came out of there and they started talking about it to themselves, back and forth. And then Eddie came over and began talking about that it was probably it belonged to the military and they would want it back, and we should leave it alone and not tell anybody about it. And they explained to us that my dad was working for the government, and also Jose's dad was working for the government, and the government could make it pretty tough on them if they knew something. So it was better that they didn't know anything, and then it wouldn't jeopardize their employment. And so we agreed to follow their instructions, and we had no choice. And of course Eddie told us, you know, if somebody asks you about this, you send them to see me. You know, that's, you know, I'll be there. You come and I'll talk to them about it. And so that's, anybody would ask us, we just tell them, go see Eddie. You know? And so that was pretty much the end of that phase. And so Jose, most of the time that they were working on that recovery effort, Jose spent as much time as he possibly could looking through, and he would come by and pick me up, and I'd go with him, mostly in the evenings, late afternoon, and observe what was going on in the recovery. During that phase of the recovery, they cut a hole in the fence and they put a gate in. And they brought in a big truck, a semi-truck. They built a frame on top of it at about a 45-degree angle. They welded it. And then, and during the time these were, from what we could tell, they were young people in the military, and probably the same people that had participated in the at Stallion site on the bomb test. They were probably some of the monitors that were in town because they knew their way around and they knew the girls and so forth. And so, because the military had monitors in front of the Owl Cafe on the day of the explosion, and they're the ones that told the public that it was an explosive magazine that had blown up on the base, and that was why the sound and everything else. And so people believed them, they trusted them, as such, and so those were the more than likely the people that were there. So they go down to the Owl Bar and Cafe. They had a jukebox there. They had hamburgers and milkshakes and all that stuff, and they had beer. There was more women than there was men, in fact, in San Antonio due to the war. People had been drafted or they volunteered for military service. And so they danced and they had more social gatherings with the military there than normal. But these Army personnel, they would work a couple hours, then go down there and spend the rest of the day there. Jose come and got me, and we went over there and looked at it, and they had it all loaded up, and so finished up. They cleaned everything up, and so we're watching, and so I says, well, what do you think? He says, I think they're going to move that baby tonight. They're going to take it. And I says, wow. I says, Jose, have you ever thought, we always get it's kind of like a tradition with us. We always get a souvenir for somebody that leaves and goes into the military. I've got a lot of stuff from my uncles and so forth. You got something to remember them by if they don't come back. And if they come back, you give it back to them, So how about getting a souvenir? He says, yeah, let's do that.
They loaded it up, they tied it, they put a tarp over it, and they tied the tarp down.
Really tight.
Then they came out as far as right here. It was a Saturday, the 18th of August. They came out as far as right here and left it right there. They got on the Jeep, all 7 of them, and they took off to the Owl Bar.
We watched them go down, and then we went up and we looked at the back of the truck and trying to figure out how long it was. So we stepped it out. I don't know how accurate it was because we were little guys. We're not very tall, and so you can step out a yard, and a yard is a yard, depends on how long or how tall you are and how wide your feet. So I don't know, but we figured maybe it was 30, 40 foot long, that tractor trailer, a lowboy they called it. And of course we're not very tall, so it's hard to get on top of it. So Jose managed to get up there and get the tarp loose, and I grabbed the ropes and held it open so he could go in there.
I went in there through the hole.
Yeah.
That's where I seen that part.
Okay.
And it was right up on the thing, and I couldn't yank it out, so I told him to go over and get a cheater. You know what a cheater bar is?
Yeah, cheater bar.
It's something that you're tying up the chains in the
Right.
truck.
Yeah.
He went over to the cabin and found a cheater bar. I went over and stuck it in there and popped out with a pin, that didn't have no threads.
Now, on the interior of the craft, was there any other objects or instrumentation or seats or anything?
No,
So-
it was clear.
So,
It was already cleared.
what did the inside look like exactly?
A flat floor.
Okay.
And an oval-shaped round.
Did the floor meet the edge so that there was an angle on the
No, there was no seams.
no seams?
No seams on it.
So everything was smooth
It
then?
just-
How would you say?
I guess it was a one piece
One piece.
molded.
Okay.
Except for that piece, that was ripped off. It was about a 5 feet
Yeah.
by 8 feet tall,
Okay.
Then
And
it was-
what did you think that was when you saw it, or you didn't really know?
well, I'd never seen one before,
Okay.
so I've seen planes.
Yeah.
But this is a strange thing, that out of the blue,
Did you try to move it at all, or see if it was like dial it or anything? Because it was like
I turned it like that in a circle. He went in circles.
oh, it did.
Real
Okay.
free.
But so you don't really know what that was for.
No,
But you took that.
Up to now, I don't know. It's not a windmill part, I know.
Yeah. So then you took the cheater bar, you popped it off.
Yeah, it popped out, and by mistake, I left the pin. It was a pin that when you snap it in, it opens.
Right.
And it fell right into the trailer right there and stayed there.
And he says, "Here, catch." So he threw it to me, and it was a piece of metal about a foot long. And so he got down from there, and he handed it to me. I held on to it, and he tied up the ropes and the tarp. And we looked at it. He wrapped it up in his jacket. We went home.
It says when I pulled this thing out of the object there, the Sergeant Villa came over to my parents' house. When they took that apparatus over there to a stallion site, they took inventory, and they found out in the inventory something was missing, which was this. That's when they came over to check over at the house. And
they knew it was missing, but they didn't know you had it.
no.
They don't know yet
Up
that
to
you
now,
have it.
no.
They don't know now.
Up to now, then no one knows except for you and these people here.
Aren't you afraid? You have it.
No. Yeah, so if they come over and arrest me, c'est la vie, I mean.
But this is very important. You took this from a UFO.
Right?
I think it's very valuable.
Well, I hope so.
What do you want to do with it?
I was planning on putting it in a museum, just to show the people, that something happened there. Because up to now, no one knows what it is.
Remy wanted a lot of money to present this, but you don't. Why?
Money is not important to me. It's just the principle. To let the people know, that I found something that doesn't belong to us. It's not from this world. But there's a lot of people that think that I lie. Even my older sister thought that it was a lie, that it wasn't possible that I took this thing out of there. That's when I drove all the way to California to the hospital where she was, and I asked her if she was there. And she says, no, well, I was. I experienced it, not her. And that was it.
Your father never told them?
Well, my father used to work as a ranger for the Bosque del Apache refuge. And they didn't want to spread anything because of the military, especially when my father and I used to pick up a lot of weather balloons that belonged to the military. And they thought that UFO was part of it. But when this came out there, they took an inventory and loaded that object on the trailer. Someone went over and took a part off. When they got over to the White Sands, they took another inventory list, and a part was missing. That's when they sent soldiers up there to check and see what, and they came over to the ranch. That's when I didn't get scared. I never been scared of nobody. That's where I took this part out from underneath the floor on the ranch and took it over to Remy's house.
Because you didn't want this to be lost.
I wanted to keep it. It's something, you know, that we call it, Remy call it that's it, tesoro. It's a souvenir, you know.
The soldiers are over talking to my dad, and they want to go through the shack over there and see what he has that belongs to them. And they're looking all over. They seem kind of mad, and I said, I don't know what they're mad about. Anyway, so I says, okay. So at that point, he brought this piece of metal to my house. And so I tried to figure out where to put it. And so there was a house across the street that we had where we kept all the harnesses and bridles, and also some of the sacks of corn that we grew. And so we oftentimes somebody would use that if a friend come over or something and he wanted to stay over, didn't have a place to stay, he could use that room there. And so anyway, I was trying to figure out where to put it, and so I had taken the planks off the floor a couple of times because I had dropped something there and I needed to get in there and get it out. And so I said, well, I'll do that. And so I pulled, the planks were loose anyway, so I pulled them out and I crawled under the floor, went to the like the northeast corner of the room and dug a little hole in the corner and put this piece of metal there. It'd be safe. And then I came out, nailed back the floorboards, and that was that. One sheep herder that Mr. Anaya, that came by there every year, would leave off a young sheep with us, a lamb, and so my dad would let him stay in that room, and he'd stay there for a week, maybe a month, visit with all the friends because he'd been out up in the mountains and the hills with the sheep, herding sheep, and so he'd stay there and visit and so forth. So this time he's, as usual, he stopped by, left off a lamb, and so he was going to stay there. And so he asked me if I wanted to go over there to where they were taking in the sheep because they were having dinner there and they made some really good stew. So I went over there. Jose was there, and we had some. There was really good stew that they made. So one morning we were having breakfast, and so the got a knock on the door. And so my dad answered the door, and Mr. Anaya was there. He was staying over at the room across the street, and so hey, I need to talk to you. Well, come on in, So he came in, have a cup of coffee with us, So sure. So we're just finishing breakfast, As he had breakfast, oh yeah, I had. Okay. So had a cup of coffee, finished up, and so okay. He says, what's on your mind? And he says, oh no, I says, because I'm going to have to, vacate the place. I said, what's wrong with you? What's going on? I said, well, I was asleep last night, and something woke me up. So I looked out the window over where the wood pile is, right by the well, and I saw this bright light there. Okay, so was it a flashlight or what? No, I don't know what it was. But then all of a sudden, there's these two creatures in my room, he says, and they got their finger like this, and they're saying, tesoro. And so he says, tesoro. Well, they're saying that there's treasure down there? And he says, yeah. Let's go look. So he got a shovel, and one of my older brothers, and we went over there to look, and we took the planks out, and they went in there and they dug where he pointed. They got a big hole, and they didn't find anything. So we put the planks back up, and so I said, well, nothing there, but you let me know if there's, if this happens again, because we'll get down to the bottom of this. We don't want you leaving. We want you to stay here. So he stayed there. As such. Incidentally, that's the name of the piece, tesoro. We had given it that name when we got it off the craft. So next time I saw Jose, I says, hey, you need to take that back. By then, the guy was gone. Mr. Anaya was gone, and so I went in there, pulled it out, and gave it back to Jose, took it home. And he buried it under his house. And then eventually it found itself into some boxes and so forth, and it sat there for a long time.
So, Jose, how long has this vegetation been here then? If it was 70 years ago the crash occurred, and this berm was built in 1968, which is 47 years ago, how long has the vegetation been there?
That's been there 2 months.
Okay, just 2 months.
About 2 months.
Just
It
showed
was
up.
the last time that Paula and I came over here.
Okay, so it's rather recent.
David, you were here before. Tell us about that.
I was here back in September 2014, and there was nothing here. It was just a big, dry, empty spot. And when we came here, obviously there's this strange growth that's been growing here, and very, very strange. Yes.
And Tom, you were here before as well.
Yeah, I was here 2 months ago, and the first time that I came 2 months ago, these plants were already growing. I came here with Jose and with Paula, and when I came, you could walk in this area. I mean, the plants were growing, but there was dry ground. Today, there's a lot of water, and the plants today are much bigger and much more prolific than they were even 2 months ago. So, yeah, 2 months ago, I remember pulling one out of the ground and had a very bad reaction to that. Broke out in hives and so forth. And then as well, Jose had an experience just recently where he pulled some of these and had a very, very bad reaction.
Time.
Oh, you did well. Now I can see.
Now you can
so
see
what you are saying.
Say it.
What you know.
Break it in parts.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
I guess we can't say there isn't anything new out there. It's just a matter of finding it. I have to tell you that this is the most exciting part of how I work. I've talked about this on Coast. I've talked about it everywhere, that field research must be done. And what are we going to do with this? We're going to put it down in the history books, because this was the first crash for your children, your children's children's children, and for the legacy of planet Earth, to know that some cultures landed there a month after the atomic bomb. And let's herald the young filmmaker that did this, Alan Ricardis, and he's going to talk about being with us because he's never done anything like this.
Yeah, this is my first field research that I did this year, and it's very exciting to be able to go out there and get to experience something like this. You know, it's mind-blowing to me. I'm only 26, and I'm just beginning to, wet my feet in this area, and it's very exciting.
Talk about Agamemnon Studios.
Yeah, so I run an Agamemnon film studio located in Novato, California, which is in Marin County. We've been doing it for about 2 years. We named it after my mentor, Agamemnon, who is a 5-time Emmy nominee for Best Sound Mixing. So he was part of the reason why I got involved into doing this, because he's just an amazing mentor. So we wanted to create a studio on his behalf.
And we have the people that came on the expedition here, so you can hear their voice. It's not just me, but it was an honor to work with other people. And I'm going to encourage people to share stories and work with other researchers. So I'm going to bring on the stage Tom Hamlin, David Garcia. You saw him in a hazmat suit. Tom was the first person that came down with me 5 years ago to interview Jose Padilla, Jaime Maussan, who did it for Univision, and of course Jan Harzan. God bless him, he came down for MUFON. Would you come on stage, please? I just went back because of the plants. The plants were a problem for me. So 1 month ago, I go back there for the 7th time with an Australian gentleman you've been seeing. He has come over for my conference, and he was all excited about doing field research, James Rigney. And he's over here. So, James, you're going to be the first one to talk about the field research and how that felt, because he had to pull out the plants, which are poisonous. Poisonous in this way that they cause your arm to blow up, your face to have a cortisol reaction in your face, and so forth. So we had to be very careful. So can you say something very short about how you felt?
Certainly. Well, we went down there at very short notice. Paula had some loose ends she wanted to tidy up for the documentary. We jumped on a flight. We went on a long drive. I was lucky to be with you. And the purpose of our visit was to partly do some work with Jose, and largely to get samples of the plants and get them tested, which...
happened in 3 days.
Yes.
Thanks to Jason Reynolds, yeah.
Yeah, so we got on a plane, we went for a big drive, we ended up at San Antonio.
Did you find Jose credible?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
He's telling the truth.
Yeah. There's none of these gentlemen here, you just can't, he's serious. He's not trying to make any money out of this. He's a wonderful man. He's passionate about this. No, he's...
And we lost Remy. You saw Remy here. We lost Remy. So I'm going to go to Tom Hamlin, with whom I went down the first time. He came with me. If I didn't have help, I couldn't do this. It's like I'm Scully and I'm looking for all the Mulders. So, okay, go ahead. How do you feel about the first time we went down there?
The first time I went down, it was a very new experience. It was interesting to be in the field. Things had been 70 years, so there was a lot of learning for me to do. But I became familiar with the crash site and with Remy. Those were the two.
Jose.
I'm sorry, Jose. I never met Remy, but with Jose and with the crash site.
Yeah, and he was with me filming the first time. And David Garcia did something even more amazing. He was digging, and he went in the hazmat suit to pick up the plant. So, David, do you feel that Jose is credible?
He's very credible. Jose is a former police officer like myself, and he's a very genuine man who didn't want any money, like we mentioned, or accolades. He just wanted the whole world to know the truth about what happened on his land. I was out there, and we actually dug. We were actually looking for more pieces, and unfortunately we didn't find anything. But so yes, and also I want to say it's ironic that a piece of the atomic bomb, Jose found a large piece on his land, and he didn't get a lot of credit for that. So
he put it. It's in the town square in Socorro, and I want to go over here to Jaime. You covered it for Univision. Thank you, Jaime, for believing the story, and you're in the clip here. What do you think about it?
Oh well, it's a real story. I talked to Jose and Remy separately. The story is very consistent, every single detail. Besides, they were little kids. They couldn't make this up. And we're now, as you know, analyzing this metal at the National University of Mexico. And I hope we will have the results very soon. And I hope this will prove that the San Antonio case is real, as well as Roswell and Aztec. I think all of these cases are related to the nuclear weapons. I believe the same kind of thing happened to them, probably a radar or something was making all this craft crash all around the area where this bomb was detonated. Then I think it's a very important case, as well as the others. But this is your real finding, because you were the one who found them and believe in it and make us believe in the case by investigating. And I can tell you as a journalist, it's a very consistent story.
Thank you. We're all together here. It isn't just, I love it that it's not my case. We all did it. Okay, and I'm going to leave the final word to you, because I want to give the film footage to MUFON to put it in its archives, because this is history.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to thank Paula for inviting me to be part of the expedition that we went down very recently. The film you saw today is actually a compilation, I think, of 4 or perhaps 5, different films over the time. And this has been Paula's investigation. She's done an outstanding job. I was very, very impressed with Jose Padilla. He's a very humble man, lives on his ranch, doesn't want anything from the world. He just wants the world to know that he and his young buddy, Remy Baca, had this experience, and they were able to somehow crowbar off a piece of this metal, which has been tested several times. So it's a fascinating story. Now, the trip that I went on with Paula was not only spending 2 days with Jose, but also going down to the Roswell Museum and having a full tour of that, as well as meeting with Clifford Stone. So it was kind of like an expedition of New Mexico. So we spent like 2-3 days there with all these guys, had a great time. I just wanted to end with one other thought, and that is that, and you saw it in the film, I had the opportunity in 2012 to talk to Remy Baca. I was trying to recruit him to be a speaker at our 2013 MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, he became ill and couldn't make it. But in talking to him, the stories that he was telling, and he doesn't live anywhere near his boyhood friend, Jose Padilla. Jose lives in New Mexico, in San Antonio, I believe, and then he lives like in San Jose or Northern California. So, okay, maybe he left in Washington, but they hadn't seen each other for like 30, 40 years. But the interesting thing to me was, having talked to Remy Baca separately 2 years prior, the stories are exactly the same. So it's, as an investigator and as an organization that talks to lots of witnesses who've had sightings of UFOs, it's very hard to get them to have the exact same story unless they rehearse it, which they hadn't, because they hadn't seen each other for decades. So terrific work that Paula has done. I congratulate her on it. We're honored to have that in our archives now, and all the team here. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is basically the work that keeps going, because everybody says, is there something new? Yes, there's something new. But let me add one more thing. It's very difficult to do because this was sponsored out of my pocket. There is no sponsorship for research, as we all know. Nobody sponsors this work. But I consider it, I don't anymore consider it my case. I did it, and all these guys are involved, and it is for the future. It is, I hope, for an archive. Now, where's the piece? The piece is this big. You didn't get a really good picture of it. The metal is being analyzed in Mexico. We've done 2 analyses. Phyllis Budinger just did. I think that the piece is probably something that the military put in there. But we're finishing this up, and the piece is in a safe deposit box right now because Jose has given the piece to humanity. Thank you.